in the United States in this town, in Dallas.
No, we take full credit for
Absolutely. Ron de Villiers, bless him. He was the first guy who had the courage or the insanity to put us out on television.
Now, the next thing I want to clear up is I have always said John Cleese.
Ah, that's right.
But I've been corrected.
Now, most people in America say Cleese. And I don't know why, but I've just noticed the last 2 or 3 weeks that the Americans have a slightly more sibilant S than the English do. For example, the person looking after me up in Boston was called Leslie. I'd never heard Leslie. I always said Leslie. But it's rather strange. Now, are we picking up that plane on the sound? It's a bit loud, isn't it?
Why don't we just kind of hold it just a second?
Yeah.
And I will get a closer shot.
There's a director for you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just back yourself
I'll back yourself up a bit. I'll go from the top, actually, so don't worry.
I think we're okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, actually, you're pronouncing it right, you see. Most Americans say Cleese. The reason that I prefer Cleese, I mean, I'm not insisting on it, I never bother to tell anyone, is that my dad was actually born Reginald Francis Cheese. Lived in the West Country, you know, which is all dairy products, and that's where the name must have originally come from. And in 1915, when he was joining up for the First World War, he was so fed up with being teased about his name that he changed the H to an L. So he would always called it Cleese. But what was strange was that my mother, whose name was Cross, with a sibilant S at the end, always called it Cleese. And as I've said once or twice, if your parents can't agree on how to pronounce their common family name, they're not going to agree on much else. But I've always preferred Cleese, and thank you for getting it right.
Okay, let's hold off just a second.
What's all this about then?
We're right in the traffic pattern of Love Fields.
But you know that's the first 2 planes I've heard since I've been in this hotel?
That's because we brought a video camera in. It's a magnet.
Okay.
All right, we're ready.
All right.
Okay. I'm sure you must know this, John, but if you don't, let me tell you the good news. A Fish Called Wanda is making more money per screen in the U.S. than any current movie.
Yeah, I heard. Amazing. And surprising, because we never thought the problem was going to be with making the American audience laugh at the movie. The problem was going to be getting them into the movie houses in the first place, because Michael Palin and I are really only known to the PBS audience. Jamie Lee Curtis is still vaguely put in that pigeonhole that says horror movie. And Kevin Kline, who to my mind is probably one of the 3 or 4 best actors in the whole of America, is still not widely known out of places like New York, where he's constantly in big Broadway hits, Shakespeare and Shaw and all this kind of thing. So it's by a pretty sustained campaign. This is the 6th week that I've been doing interviews and so forth. We've managed to get enough media coverage to get the first wave of people into the cinemas. And the most exciting thing of all is not the good reviews, but is the word of mouth, which is terrific. And that's wonderful, because there's nothing nicer, absolutely nothing, than the news that people are really laughing at something that you've done. You know, that's heartwarming.
I'll make your day. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars.
Really?
And I said it's the funniest movie I've seen this year. I was wrong. I should have said in several years.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah.
How great. Well, I'm really pleased. It's a great feeling. You see, the only thing I miss from the stage, because now that I'm nearly 50, I don't want to have to get up every night and say the same things to the same people. You know, I have better things to do, like going to the theatre to watch other actors do that. But the only thing I miss from stage is being up there and hearing the audience laugh, because that's a very heady medicine, that is. Can you have a heady medicine?
You say so.
Yeah, a heady medicine.
Okay. Was there ever any problem with the name of the movie, the title of the movie? What I'm thinking about is that when it was first coming into view, so, well, what is it like? Is it Splash? Is it Jaws?
Yeah.
Did anybody ever try to get you to change the title?
MGM queried the title with me, not very strongly, a couple of times, and I told them a story which I think is very relevant. I said to an American publicist about 4 years ago, and he's one of the famous ones, I said, what is the hardest kind of movie for you to publicize? And he said, anything original. He said the moment that a movie is derivative, you can sell it because you can describe it. If you liked X, you'll love Y. But the moment you have something original, it is impossible to describe it in 4 or 5 words. You cannot paint a picture in 4 or 5 words of something that's entirely different from anything else. So I like the title for 2 reasons. That when I actually said A Fish Called Wanda to people, they grinned. About 3 people out of 5 immediately grinned. And even the ones who didn't grin would sort of take a little movement forward as if to say, well, tell me more. And that's all I think you can do with a title. If you can amuse a few people and make a few of them think, well, what's it about? That's all you can do, if it's original. Otherwise, if it's the sort of latest Sylvester Stallone, you can call it Buckets of Blood 6. You know what I mean? Everybody knows exactly what it is.
There is a great deal of black humor running throughout A Fish Called Wanda, and
Yeah.
I love that, and
Great.
I respond to that.
Can I tell you something just for a second? My favorite moment in the entire 6 weeks I've been here so far is 2 really quite elderly ladies, well into their 60s, coming up to me after the New York showing on the Wednesday when we had a tiny little premiere. And they came up with really quite beady expressions, and I thought, whoops, they don't like it. And one of them said to me, why didn't you kill more dogs? Because she loved those sequences so much when Michael Palin keeps killing the dogs by accident. I thought it was a great line.
Is black comedy, black humor, just natural and innate with you?
I think it's natural and innate with most people. I mean, if you look at the great American tradition of that, starting with Chaplin, which was very largely people chasing people, kicking each other, pinching each other's food. You know, it was all to do with that slightly black, very competitive world that Chaplin came from. Then you think of Groucho Marx talking to Margaret Dumont, or above all, the supreme example is W.C. Fields, or Laurel and Hardy, who quite clearly couldn't stand each other. I don't mean in real life, but I mean on the screen, they're constantly in a state of conflict and doing rather mean things to each other. You carry that great traditional thread of mean humor right the way through to Danny DeVito in Taxi. And that's a great tradition, and the English have got a very similar tradition going even further back to Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote a very funny book called The Wrong Box, all about a dead body. And I think this is a very, very strong thread that you find in both cultures' humor, which is really only moderated in recent years by the terror of television companies of doing anything that offends anyone. But the truth is, it's this stuff, the mean stuff, that really makes people laugh. The blander, safer humor may make them smile, but it doesn't produce the howls, the gut laughs that the slightly mean stuff does, and always has.
I've always had a kind of private theory, John, that you Brits can get by with more in the way of black humor and outrageous humor. Simply because you are perceived as being, you know, a little grander than we Yanks. Do you agree or not?
Well, there's certainly a very strong tradition of it, because over and above what I've already said, if you think of the Ealing comedies, the famous ones with Guinness and so forth, Guinness and Peter Sellers, Kind Hearts and Coronets, one of the classics, 8 people are killed. The Lady Killers, all about very polite old ladies drinking tea, 6 people killed. It's a very, very strong strain. But I think the English have got a slight tendency to be a little sillier in some of their humor. Even if you go back to Edward Lear or Lewis Carroll, you know, in this very staid Victorian era, there was still this fairly crazy humor going on. Whereas I think the Americans, being more emotionally direct, don't have quite that tradition of silliness. I think that's the one difference, effectively, between us.
Did Jamie Lee and Kevin have any trouble getting into the rhythm of your film?
Not really, because you see, I wrote their parts with them. I don't know if you knew this, but from the moment that Jamie was on board, which was 18 months before we started to shoot the movie, she and I were in constant contact. She came through England about six times that year because her husband Chris was working in Paris and also in the north of England with Rob Reiner. And every time she came through, we'd have conversations. I'd show her the scenes that I'd written, and I was very keen to find what she liked and what she didn't like. It was like trying to find the points on the graph, and when you had enough points, you could sort of draw draw the line, and that was what the character was. And very much the same with Kevin. Worked with Kevin regular intervals and finished up in the West Indies together for 8 days, during which time really we finalized Otto. I mean, we both improvised him, and I sat there with a pen and rushed back to England and put it all down. So by the time they came on the set, this was what was so fabulous about the way that we were able to make this film, the process by which we made it. They were so at ease with those characters. They knew who they were because they'd created them themselves. And therefore, the first day of shooting, everybody was acting and was there without what you sometimes get in the first week, which is people being a bit tentative and trying to find their character.
Michael, the stuttering role, that was written for him?
I had just had this silly idea about a man with some sort of speech impediment, but a guy who didn't have that all the time, but only had it when he became nervous, because Michael's character never has the stutter when he's talking to his own fish, you know? But like a lot of animal rights people, he's a lot easier with animals than he is with human beings, which I think is a very good joke. So that when he gets put under real pressure at the end, he simply cannot get this information out. I had that idea right from the beginning, and right from the beginning I knew that I wanted Michael to play it. For two reasons. One, he's the funniest man in England. There's no question about this. I cannot get through a stage performance of Monty and take her seriously, and that there's affection for her. She gets much softer when she becomes apprehensive.
Are we ready?
We're ready. I'm sorry. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. I have always pronounced it John Cleese, but people keep correcting me all the time and say, no, it's John Cleese.
Well, you got it right. Because, you see, my father was born da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da.
Okay. Did anybody ever try to get you to change the title?
Well, MGM raised the question, da-dum-de-dum, da-da-da-da-da.
Oh, okay. Excuse
me.
All right. There's a great deal of black humor in this movie. Is that a natural viewpoint for you?
I think it's a natural viewpoint for both the British and the Americans, because da-da, da-da, da-da-da-da-da, da-da.
John, I have a private theory that you Brits can get by with more in the way of black humor. I don't know, something about we just perceive you as being more grand than we Yanks.
I think it's funny. I think there's a tradition in England of a kind of crazy abstract.
Did you write the stuttering part specifically for Michael Palin?
Yes, because I had right at the very beginning when we were working on the film, I had this.
Okay, I think, are you still rolling?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, let me just get some silent reactions. Talk about anything.
All right. The carts in the Tempertonis Merc, the Gluposis Novakrot Mergutschuzes, the Stavilis Grizzlebottom Pardivisor Cruise, together the mood sliver the underpedity, so fourth frame shows data vision and auditory slope of faction. Resonatory frictation induces corresponding blip mortalizer. That all comes under Crowler's electropulmonary certification, which you will underlies in that professor course. Multicentric combulates making contaste together to slip temperance and expendency. And reflection inertia corresponds to Geiger-Schnitz and Hugo-Bevert's supercredity balance multiparatory equation, E equals 2R. All right?
Get it? Okay.
That is marvelous.
Quick spot.
What is all of that?
It's just nonsense.